Welcome back to Weenie Trades in week 2 of 2022. In this video, I'm going to be going over SPY, the Qs, interest rates, and then potential trade setups for the upcoming week. So if it sounds a little bit different, I'm filming this from my laptop and on my Google Pixel Buds because I'm away from home. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. First up we got is SPY, and SPY over here, I'm expecting a little bit of chop, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But basically, I don't expect SPY to get too clapped to the downside. Maybe we could sell off as low as 456, but and maybe we could rally a little bit higher, but I wouldn't expect SPY to get much higher than about 473. If we quickly check something like the expected move over here on the SPY, so this will load up over here. So in this video, we're going to be going over SPY, the Qs, financials, the 10-year, VIX, Bitcoin. We're going to talk about a few trade setups for this upcoming week as well. So right over here, we just got loaded up. That's very nice. So over here, this week we've got about a $7 expected move for the week. So that puts SPY at about 459 and, not much higher than about, 473. So that makes about a relative sense of the expected move seems to be pretty fair valued. I think it could be a little bit breached, a little bit lower to the downside. So how to profit off of SPY is utilizing those credit spreads and selling higher implied volatility and higher expected moves when we're at support. So let's say SPY starts to come into support, you can sell some credit spreads because it's not likely to break much lower. And I wouldn't expect SPY to break this pivot low of 452. So that's just the SPY overall. On a weekly time frame, I don't think the correction gets much worse than like 10%. And that would put SPY, down at, I wouldn't expect SPY to get clapped further down than 420. So that's something to think about. I would be very surprised if SPY just randomly busted up and saw new all-time highs. So that's the SPY. Let's check out the Qs, QQQ. We talked about last week how the Qs probably going to be a little bit more relatively weak. And there you go. The Qs had a decent down week, down 5-6%. Pretty nasty. And we'll talk about the Qs a little bit later. There's a little bit of a relative strength and weakness pairing between the TNX. So the TNX starting to break out, kind of broke this little channel to the upside right over here. Do you see that? Nice little breakout containing right over there, breakout over 1702 and then 1767. So if the TNX pulls back a little bit, tech stocks could get a little bit of a rebound. But really, what I'm keeping an eye on is the XLF, and I still am long the XLF. So as you recall last week, the XLF, we had a nice good flagpole, bull flag, boom, pop. And last week, if you saw in the live stream, I was grabbing the dip on the XLF. We started to run into support back over here at about 40.20, boom. Now the XLF is still running. And if the XLF can continue, we could see the XLF as high as like 41.85, 42. And maybe over the next coming weeks and or months, we could see the XLF at 44. So still long the XLF, let's see here, Jan 28th, long the 40 strike call. And this is just the last quarter of the position. So those are financials. Next up we got is the VIX, the Volatility and Fear Index. And I think even if we do start selling off, I don't think that the VIX is going to really go crazy. I don't think it's going to do that. I think it might get maybe a little bit of a pop if we have a bit of a sell-off. But I actually expect this kind of to be a time where the VIX just kind of creeps on lower and the markets could still drift on lower. So not exactly that perfectly inverse correlation between the VIX and the overall market. I also want to touch on Bitcoin /BTC and Bitcoin getting clapped. And Bitcoin, if you recall, I was saying, hey, I'm starting to sell some Bitcoin, 56K, starting to sell a little bit more at about 50K. And that's because we just started to do bear flag, drop, descending triangle, drop. So Bitcoin probably, maybe we could get a little bit of an oversold rally. But even then, I wouldn't expect it to hold much higher than 50K. And we could just continue to zig on down. And cryptocurrencies could be going through quite a bit of pain. We'll see. But I think if you're looking to buy the dip on Bitcoin, 35K seems to be a good area to put in a little bit more money back into Bitcoin. So that's the ETF overview. I briefly wanted to touch on last week's trade setups. Do you guys remember Ford? Ford, everybody was talking about Ford this week. And it's pretty interesting because, look, there's that flag break. We said long Ford over 21. Talked about this consolidation. We never broke the low of consolidation. We did a bull flag, boom, pop, over 21. Nice, good move. And now that everybody's talking about Ford, now is not the time to be buying Ford. That's generally a good sign that you probably want to be selling Ford. And over here, Ford, you could probably get a little bit of a breakout, but I actually probably would look for a false breakout, and you could jab that, and you can actually sell or go short and put your stop loss above the highs on Ford. You could probably see Ford back to 22, maybe even 21. So keep an eye out on Ford for that false breakout. That's not necessarily a trade setup, but I'm just saying Ford is no longer a long, in my opinion. It was a long, though, over 21. Not so much a long anymore. Last week we talked about midweek. Hey, GME, GameStop puts. GameStop puts. This is a rollover formation. And that's exactly what happened. Rollover formation. Nice, good move. Gets a little bit of a gap up, but they sold the gap up. The market participants, that is, sold the gap up right away. So GameStop, extremely bearish underneath 130, can likely continue to get clapped if GameStop is coming underneath 130. Next up we got is Rivian. And Rivian, we talked about Rivian short underneath 100. Talked about this bear flag, drop, bear flag, drop. And this is why I'm talking about EVs a lot. EVs, I think, are a little bit overvalued. I don't think that they're a bubble, but I just think that they're a little bit overvalued. The EV play was back in 2020. Now EV is no longer the play. You got to stick to a little bit more boring values type stuff until there's a rotation back into some higher growth names. So Rivian talked about that short setup at 100. If Rivian bounces up and rejects off of 100, it's a short again. Otherwise, Rivian probably going to go sideways, maybe even sideways to slightly lower. And lastly, remember last week we talked about PLTR. You can take that short setup on PLTR. Beautiful bear flag. There's a lot of short setups, and it could have just been a dartboard red day, meaning everything was getting clapped. Everything was selling off. You could have just thrown a dart at a dartboard and sold short and made some money. But PLTR, nasty. I'd expect PLTR, even if it comes back to the breakdown area, 18, it still is short. And it's probably going to zigzag and go sideways to slightly lower. There's a lot of people talking about, but Kathy's buying it this time. Every time Kathy's bought it, it's ran up. Well, not so much anymore. She bought a bear flag. So just be careful following people. Just do what you think is best and follow the charts. And even if that is a long, just make sure that you manage your risk. So those are last week's trade setups. This week, still looking at the bank stocks. I'm currently long Morgan Stanley, but I'd love to add to this position over 104.62. We just quickly check the trade tab. Right now, I've got a vertical spread right over here, 103 by 106. And then I do have a call contract that is through earnings. I'm probably not going to hold through earnings, probably going to take profits beforehand. And then I just got a little bit of 30 shares. So the overall delta is pretty decent on Morgan Stanley. But this is one of my favorite setups where we're starting to press the top end of consolidation. We've got a catalyst coming up. We got a flag set up, and we're near all-time highs. And the expected move seems to be pretty reasonable, but I think that the options chain might be a little bit inefficient and that Morgan Stanley can go a little bit more than $3.47 this week and maybe go as high as something like 109, 110. We'll see, though. That is if the interest rates continue to break out. So that's a potential trade setup. I'm not telling you to buy Morgan Stanley. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I'm looking at. None of this is a recommendation to buy or sell any security, and it never will be. And so next up we got is Li Auto, and Li Auto is actually a short setup. Remember I was talking about the EV sector being a little bit overvalued. This was just a simple drop bear flag, and if Li Auto can come underneath 28, I don't think that this would be a crowded short trade. You can probably get Li Auto down to maybe 26. So Li Auto short underneath 28, stop loss, a daily close above 30. And first target at 26, and it could probably go a little bit lower, maybe even down to 25, or maybe just a little bit lower. So keep an eye out on Li Auto for a short setup. And then lastly, we just talked about the Qs. Qs could be a short setup. I would go with an in-out debit spread, meaning buy one put in the money and then sell one put just slightly out of the money. And that's if the Qs are really starting to break down underneath Friday's low. that'll be about 378. So Q's underneath 378 could be a short setup. What I would be aware of, though, is a potential jab where we just sell off and then jab right higher. Because look at this trend line. Dates all the way back to March of 2021. Nice, good hold, 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 hold. And so we could just jab right into it, maybe stick stave and come back up, and then just maybe just chop around because there's some components of the Qs that are strong and some that are weaker. So be careful on something like the Qs. I did talk about the NDX option chain, and boy, the NDX options chain is cracked. I mean, this is crazy. If we just like quickly load this up, the spreads are really wide, and I'm just not sure if it's a great trading vehicle unless your account size is well over 100 grand or more. So keep an eye out on the Qs for a short setup. And boy, just waiting up over here. Here we go. Yeah, $192 expected move because this is an index option. And you can see that, yeah, if they ever load up, the bid-ask spreads are going to be just a little bit wide, if you ask me. So that concludes today's video. Be sure to stay tuned for details on an upcoming Hot Ones stream. I'll be giving details on further videos and live streams. And be sure to check out links in the description to help support the stream, or if you want to take your trading to the next level, or if you just love something like trading quizzes, whatever it may be. But yeah, look at these spreads over here. Gosh, absolutely insane. NDX may not be the way to go, so I'm just going to be going with QQQ, potential in-out debit spreads, whatever it may be. So thanks for tuning in. Comment something below what you're watching this week. Alrighty, bye-bye.